Was good friends with him. Sure was. I probably didn't know him in about 5 years or so,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
something like that. But we kind of were on the same page with a lot of stuff, you know. We both grew up around old people kind of and learned the old people's ways of, you know, fishing and life on the coast, you know. So we had a lot in common anyway. In fact, Sunday we walked out of church together and we stood around and talked for a little bit. We're both walking out to the parking lot, and he was telling me what he was going to do. You know, he was going to go down to Fort Pickens. He had his surfboard. He had his cast net, and he was either going to go catch some waves or catch some mullet one. I had no idea, you know, that was the last time I'd ever speak to him, you know.
Yancey was talking to me about how much he knew, just talking to Ken, and Ken is the one who talked about you. He was saying how you guys had those shared things, and I love what you said about grew up around old people. Can you tell me more about that transfer of knowledge?
Well, back when he and I, in our time when we were young people, there was no internet or anything. There were no cell phones. You sit on the front porch with grandparents and whatnot, you know, late in the evening and heard stories. You know, that was the primary way of passing information down, was through stories, you know. Mm-hmm. Kind of like Indians did and all, you know. Our ancestors did that too. Definitely a Gulf Coast native, you know. Like I was telling you, you know, he was a simple feller. He used and practiced a lot of the old school ways of doing things, from feeding his family to disposition with people and whatnot, you know. Mm-hmm. In the years that I knew him, I never seen him angry. He was always upbeat. Struck a common ground with him when we first met. We first met at church, at the Upper Room Church, and I think I was doing a fish fry there when I first met him, frying mullet, and he was a big mullet fan. You know, I found that out right off the bat, so we had something in common there. At the time, I was a commercial mullet fisherman. Our kind of friendship and bond kind of grew from that. Mm-hmm. We talked at different times about all the different things that we had learned, not off the internet, but we'd learned it from our ancestors, you know, our grandparents mostly.
Yeah.
You know, sitting on the front porch and listening to old people talk in the afternoons, you learned a lot.
Yeah.
Whether you knew it or not, you actually absorbed this culture, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, he loved to can food, fish, mullet, loved to can mullet and vegetables and whatnot, and that's kind of a thing that's lost anymore, you know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Kind of where we were together, you know. We surfed together some here in the last few years, quite a bit, especially on the good swells. Here in the last few years, you know, we've been surfing together some, both in Pensacola and at Navarre.
Yeah.
He'd been coming to Navarre here recently quite a bit, and we surfed together there. I'd like to remember him like that, you know.
Yeah.
Who's fixing to go on the next big adventure, you know.
How do you think he would like us to respond to his passing?
I think he would love for us to celebrate his life. Mm-hmm. I don't think he would want us to crawl in a hole or nothing like that, you know, and I think he'd want us to carry on. I think he'd want us to continue surfing. Mm-hmm. His motto was to live forever. Yeah. I think that's what he would like for us to do, is live forever. I mean, he was a devout Christian, so I strongly believe that you know, he's beyond the crystal sea today, you know. I think he would want us to carry on. I think he'd want us to do what we can to protect the environment, the delicate environment that we have here, do what we can to preserve a way of life that our ancestors thrive off of, you know.
Kind of my very first memory of him, I was probably about 14. I was kind of getting into surfing, as I was like one of the only young surfers around, and my dad kind of shielded me and took me surfing, but you know, every now and then I get to venture off and meet other surfers. Mm-hmm. I think he's like 20 years older than me, so if I was 14, he was probably 34, you know. So I guess what stands out the most is at age 14, I meet this guy on the sand dune checking the surf. This guy, Mark, started explaining to me the ecosystem, and he started explaining to me the life that it evolves, and it's like he started opening these pages in my mind to everything's connected, you know, like what you're seeing on top of the water is the wind comes from the sun the sun heats up the plants. Like he, in a short period of time, he broke down life was around me, and it kind of, I think it sticks out so much because it was one of those awakening moments. And as a kid, you realize that because all you get as a kid is program from TV. You're like, I need to listen to music and play sports. It's like, and that was just society. But so he was a different breath of fresh air from society. He brought me into reality, like a moment of clarity that I went, I'm alive right now, and so is everything else.
Yeah.
So at 14, just my first meeting with him on an intellectual level, he just pinpointed me, just boom, like, and then he took it so far, like he explained what plants could actually grow on the sand dunes and how they help each other. And he explained the beach mouse. We had an endangered beach mouse that, when you don't understand what an endangered beach mouse is, but he explained the whole, before Nature Channel, he explained how the beach mouse, carries the seed of the sea oat to the this, and the crab feeds off that, and the crab gives this, and then those fish eat that, and then annually jubilees come, so just right there, my very first moment with him, he opened a world to me that probably changed my life as far as I knew that's what I wanted to know more of and be a part of. So my whole focus in life zeroed in on what I call reality, which is the earth is alive, we're alive, enjoy it right now, and be a part of it. Just step one, he was a great mentor to me. And, we lived on the island my whole life together. So I got to see him, do everything, play music, sail, fish, surf, carve tikis. He taught me a lot about carving tikis. I got into carving tikis for a long time, and he was a great mentor on woods, where to get the woods, why the woods are the way they are. Just a wealth of knowledge that just was endless. Anytime you saw him, he could probably connect whatever you were doing to what he's learned, to what life is really about. And so we all kind of went through this wild phase where we kind of ran the bars on the beach and the smoothie shops and the beach service. So we were just kind of wild Indians on the island. And I remember, I think, his daughter kind of got of age. They lived at Oriole Beach Road, which is just kind of just a stepping stone right over to the Live Oak National Seashore area, which is down the highway.
Yep.
So his kids were coming of age. His son started surfing. I think his daughter, she was that free spirit too. She knew she wanted to go her own way, and she started walking to church, and that inspired, I think, Emma to start going to church with her, and so that his church life really kind of started over at New Life, which is over the Coastline Calvary now. But anyway, that intertwined with what he had been through, which is working with his brother in Africa. Some of his stories about Africa are just mind-blowing. But once again, I can't even start anywhere because his stories of Australia are mind-blowing. His stories of Hawaii are mind-blowing. Like, his real original Hawaii stories can just keep you entertained for hours. It's just, you can't believe where he was and what he did just in the Hawaiian world. And then to meet the Australians and end up in their world, and then bring some of the Australians here to connect to other people, and now other people go to Australia. Like, he was just this conductor of just right spot, right time, right people, right energy, living right, following the light. Like, I think that's why he just shined from the inside out, because he was on a path of enlightenment, really. Yeah. And that's who he was. And 7 years ago, you wouldn't even see people in the grocery store. Now, there's a line at every counter. So this place has changed, and people have come in, and churches have grown, and population has grown. So he still had enough energy to keep connecting to people that came here, and kind of guide them in the right direction. But for me, he was a family member, as far as a beach island tribe family member, and he just was tuned in. He could tell you where the mullet were, where the flounder were, what everything was without. I think he still had a flip phone. You know what I mean? It's just he didn't need exterior life to teach him anything. It was all ingrained. But I got to work with him over in Perdido. He has an old family beach house on this beautiful point island, and we would take long lunches in a boat, go traveling around in the boat, and he would throw the cast net and tell me stories just about from Pensacola to Perdido, the whole. He lived in Port St. Joe and Panama City, just the stories along the Gulf Coast you could fill a book with, just from his family and what they did and where they were and who they were and where they started. from the orange groves in Orange Beach to, the scallops in Port St. Joe. I mean, he was so rooted in so many directions. It was staggering. It was overwhelming to know that you didn't know where the conversation was going to go with him, but it all led to where where he would just be right there in it, and your mind would be blown. You're just like, wow, that was what a wonderful life. Like, what a wonderful life is him. Like he when he talks about his childhood being in boats and fishing in the Perdido area where there was no one. I mean, before condos, before people went to the beach, like it's just your mind goes to this wonderful existence on the Gulf Coast where you just survived off of nature. And he knew everything. He knew how all the fish lived off each other and when and what to throw back and what to keep and how to cook and how to cut it. And even the special ways to cook and cut it, just little tricks. Just the little tricks were endless. And we would work on his yard, and we would work at his land over in Perdido. It's pretty jungly, and not jungly, but nature reserve is just growing everywhere. So everything we cut or trimmed or hacked, like he knew how to do it, and he knew what animal this was going to affect. If we pull this vine down and this type of spider won't get over to this area, and these ants will now get the droppings, and he was the nature channel. It was just, but he learned because his eyes were so wide open growing up as a kid. He soaked it all in, kept the knowledge, and then knew how to share it at the right time. So he was a gifted individual. I'm sure everyone's told you. I mean, he played music, and he could carve, paint. I mean, some of his artwork, his art stories just are mind-blowing about how some of his art got into a gallery. I think his mother was an art teacher, this special, place. And I mean, I can't keep all the information even in my head because it's overwhelming, really, from his mom being an art teacher to his whole family being connected into fishing and music. It's just, he represented true Gulf Coast living, because he knew it all, lived it all, and survived off it all, and lived simply, and can try to keep things simple. Just like even, just the flip phone idea. He just, I knew I couldn't send him a picture of anything because it was pointless. But to get a phone call from him was special, like, hey, I'm down here throwing my cast net, and I actually see a sailboat with a wave, at such and such spot, and you know where it is, click. So he thought about people, he knew what everyone's kind of needs were and approached them in that way. And just watching him just evolve into a sincere human that wanted to serve people, even into the following the Bible's ways, orphans and widows. And, when you read the whole Bible, you kind of cut to the chase of what has been distorted over the years, and you realize it's really simple. Put others first and to care about your neighbor. And that's pretty much, once you get the meat of it and you ride that train, everything kind of just keeps blossoming in your life. And he was living proof of that. And it was cool. I surfed with him Tuesday, and then he called me on Wednesday, and I knew he would be down there on Saturday, Sunday, and then for him to pass away on Sunday, it was like, well, what a fitting, weekend to the week that I got to see him, help him zip up his wetsuit. You get older at 72, you need help with things, but he was still an able body. I mean, we built a pier together, and he had to be 70, and but the way he built it was so unique. I mean, he would use ropes and pulleys and sleds, and we didn't have to. Nothing was overwhelming. Like, I'd be looking at this giant piece of wood that we'd have to put underneath the dock, and somehow he would have a way with one edge is going to be on this pad, one edge is going to be on this sled, and we got this rope here, and if you pull it with one hand, it'll slide across the bottom, and it's like effortless engineering. I was like, wow. It's like, I mean, that was him. It was endless. And no matter, if we're going fishing, here, this will work for this, and this is that, and put the oil on there, wrap your finger with this, and put your oil around that, and watch the, you know what I mean? It's like, and all of a sudden, everything you ever wanted to do is so simple and so basic, and you see someone else show up with everything, tackle boxes, tools, gear, and you're like, wow, we're having way more fun with two items.
Yeah.
And they're having, they've spent $300 on items, and we're doing the same thing. So it was that type of life, that just shined out, that a lot of people are craving, that they want to be taught how to live this way. And he was just ahead of the curve. Whatever his upbringing was with his mom being a teacher and stuff, I think added to his being able to teach. But the funniest story, I mean, he was in a band with some wild dudes, and I guess they got a gig in New Orleans once, and it was like on this, like, kind of like this Nazi Ku Klux Klan, white supremacy land, and they had been hired by this guy who was in the, probably the Freemasons. Like, the story's just so in depth with connections, and it was back in the swamp, and you had to go through this gate, and the gate had guys with shotguns, and you had to look the part to get in. And, of course, they were surfers. They had kind of long hair, so they were kind of worried about these guys being hippies. And so they get into this, like, lodge, I guess, this private club lodge, and they were the band. And, there was a pool table, and the whole crowd was on the other side of the bar. And so they started playing, and no one acknowledged them, and they played about 3 songs, and no one clapped, no one looked at them, and they were all kind of sweating and getting nervous. Yeah. And I think they started playing a House of the Rising Sun, and like one old guy kind of turned and started looking at them, and then, they got halfway through the song and they had someone singing along, and then a couple other people started singing along, and so they got through the whole song, House of the Rising Sun, there is a house in the world. And so by the end, they finally won the crowd. He was like, all right. And then he's like, and then the crowd was like, play it again. So they had to play, House of the Rising Sun again, and then more of the crowd started coming in from outside. Oh, and then play it again. He's like, they played House of the Rising Sun like 7 times in a row. It's like, but then they were in. It was like you just never know. But it's just, I mean, I can't even tell you the stories. It's too much. But it was. I'm sure he did lose a lot. He lost almost everything in Ivan. He lost everything in a house fire once. I mean, he probably had the best surf magazine collection going, period. And to lose all that would have been a tough blow, but he just took it in stride. Like, it wasn't meant to be kind of guy, like if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If it's not, it's not. There's no need to worry or stress about a thing because, he had, through life experience, he learned it all works out. And then through his faith, he really learned that not only was he plugged in already to life and life's source, now he knew the Creator and the Savior, which just kind of gave him even more of a peace, more of a tranquil vibe through the day. His tranquil vibe just shined, and he shared it, and it was a much needed pillar in our community. I mean, he reflected the old Gulf Coast and the new future way of which way we should go, which is love, kindness, caring, peace, joy, Jesus, all of it.
I've known Mark as an acquaintance since the mid-'70s, but I never knew him well until the last 5 or 10 years. And that's through surfing, of course, at the Upper Room Church. We'd go to this really neat men's Bible study called the Man Cave. Kenny Griffin has a super successful lawn maintenance, landscape business, and he owns several properties in Oriole Beach for his business. And he bought one. He called it the Man Cave because he has all his toys there, and he just wanted to do something neat with it. So several years ago, we started this men's study. We have a potluck, and it's just so casual, so good. And MA just kind of became the resident worship guy. He leads one song every week, and like an old hymn, but in his bluegrass way. And the guys love it. It's so good. And we've lost our worship guy, which is sad.
Yeah.
But the thing about Mark, I never knew if I could trust, because every time I tell a story or talk about a friend I knew from the past, he just so happened to know them and have his own story about them. And it could be all over the world. It could be anywhere. But I thought he's just he elaborates a lot here.
Okay.
Time went on, I found out he really did know these people.
Uh-huh.
Like I remember in the late 70s seeing him on the North Shore at a coffee shop he worked at called Cup of Coffee.
Uh-huh.
And he worked there so I'd see him, but then, I didn't really, I just say, hey, I get some cookies or something and go home, go surfing or whatever. So I know his stories of the North Shore are real. About a year ago, he came up to me and he told me, we're at the Man Cave, and he goes, Tom, Paul Newkirk just died. I said, Paul Newkirk, how did you know him? Because he was my boss when I worked for Gordon Smith Surfboards and Surfwear and Skateboards years ago. Mm-hmm. And he knew that he died. I go, wow, I didn't know that. And then he would tell me stories about Craig and Julie Klein, and Julie Klein had a board bag business called Julie Designs that were real popular.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking, wait a minute, I've known them. How do you know them? And I talked to them, and sure enough, oh yeah, we know Mark. Yeah, we love him. And a couple of days ago, a guy reached out from Delaware, a surfer named Dean Pusey, because a lot of the guys from here would go up to Delaware in the summers and go surf. And I didn't know that. I don't think MA ever went up there,
Mm-hmm.
but he reached out and said, what happened to MA?
Yeah.
Dean, how did you know MA? And he starts telling me all these stories, but it's like MA did everything, knew everybody, went everywhere somehow. I don't get it, but he did. Like we said earlier, yeah, he made you feel like you were the only friend he had. I mean, he would talk to you so sincerely and give you all his focus, super humble. But then after a while, you realize that he knew thousands of people, and I think he did the same with everybody. It was just his character.
Yeah.
So just a great guy. And I said something last night when I was speaking to the guys at the Single Fin that I don't remember where it is, but there's a scripture somewhere, it might be in Proverbs, that talks about the thing that's lasting from a person, the most enduring quality, which are my words, is a person's kindness.
Mm-hmm.
Because people that are cruel and all, you don't want to remember. You just forget them. But people that are kind, you just remember that forever. And I think that's why so many people have been touched, because he was so kind, and everyone misses that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's my take on Mark.
If you had to guess, how would Mark want us to respond to his passing?
Mark was a strong believer in Christ. I think he'd want everyone to look to Christ and know that we could have eternal life with him forever. And I know, I told this to the guys. I said, look, this is me from a Christian perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I said, Mark and I talked face-to-face Sunday morning, and then Sunday afternoon, Mark's talking to God face-to-face.
Yeah.
And I meant it. It's not just a nice thing to say that in a greeting card, but it's very true. It's real. And I think that's definitely the way he would want to be thought of and remembered, and what he would want people to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he had such a genuine love for the Lord, and it's something I think it just really grown in the last 10 years for him. It become very, very real to him.
I'm trying to remember where the first time I met Mark. I think it was just out in the water one day, and then we went on many, many mission trips together, surf trips. He lives very close to my office and to my home, so then we started going to church together. Mark, very special type of person. He never would cram his belief on anybody. He pretty much lived it in front of them. And they would see how he lived and how he treated everybody. And then they would start asking questions like they could see how different he was. And I have a Bible study that Mark led the worship in. He plays the guitar fabulous. Everything he does good. It's crazy. The surfing, the music, fishing, gigging flounder. I mean, whatever he put his mind to, he was good at. He used to make homemade bread, bring it to the Bible study, and he even was good making bread. Come on. It was unbelievable. But the story I told last night at the Bible study is that everywhere I went with him, he knows everything about everything. If you're in a certain country, he knows everything about that country. If you're out in a surfing break, he knows that break. If you mention Indonesia, he'll tell you a surf break in Indonesia. And I mean, it's crazy. It was just, I told him at one time, I said, Mark, you could be lying to me and I would never know, because all these things you're saying to me, I have no way of proving they're true or not. So I'm just believing you know what you're talking about. You were just I don't know how you describe it. Somebody described him as a Renaissance man last night, because, he catches his food. And I talked to his son-in-law last night. Him and one of his grandsons came, and he said that as long as he can remember, Mark would always go catch fish, and he would feed his family fish, and he'd grow stuff in the garden. And he was an artist, and he built palapas. I helped him build a big old palapa in Nicaragua for an orphanage. And I mean, he was just so talented at everything he did, and he was never, ever would not share it with you. He would share it with the kids. He would share it with. We had these two new young boys starting to come to the Bible study, and they both play guitar and banjo, and he just took them under his wing, started teaching them and showing them, and they came last night in his honor and played. It was really great to see them there. I don't know what else to say about the guy, except I'm going to really miss him.
Well, what was your favorite thing about him when you were interacting with him?
I think I'd have to say how he knew so much about everything. I don't know if he was a big book reader or what, but anything, I mean, any conversation you had about, if you talked about a fishing pole, he would start telling you where those bamboo poles are made.
So that's the mystery. We got to find out. How did this man get so much information?
I know it. That's one of the guys last night, they go, I think he was an angel.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the gentleman shared a story where he's a carpenter and he fell off a roof and he's laying there on the ground with his back broke, and all of a sudden he hears a voice, and it's Mark Anderson. And he says, Mark, is that you? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, what are you doing here? He goes, I just had this intuition just to come by and check on you. And he said, well, I'm glad God told you that because I need some help.
Wow.
So he got him to the emergency room, and he's up walking again now, but it's a slow process back. But he told the story last night, and it was unbelievable. Mark had so many good qualities. It's hard to pick one out of him, but I think the idea of him knowing so much is my son is buying my rental house. He went over there and painted a mural on the wall, and I watched him do it. I mean, and it's a surfer coming out of a big wave and a big mountain in the background. And I mean, he's so talented.
Yeah.
And in building those palapas, he didn't use nail guns and all that. He did it old style, where you tie everything. And it was so cool.